I'm very pleased to introduce Asad AbuKahlil, who teaches at the California State University at Stanislaus, and is going to be the Arab uprisings. Please welcome
him. Let's start right away. Well, I think it's fair to say, to summarize the political situation of the region as follows. There is a tide of revolution sweeping through the region. I will be very careful in my remarks not to refer to any of the political movements in the region as a revolution per se. I think that the ingredients of a revolution has not been completed in any of the countries that we are talking about now. I think it's fair to say there is revolutionary fervor, there are revolutionary ambitions, but as of now, there is not a complete revolution in any of the countries we're talking about. This is why I refer to them as uprising, revolution in the making. I mean, look at Egypt. I mean, you cannot call it a revolution with Field Marshal Tantawi, as he calls himself with the title, in charge. That's certainly not a revolution. I mean, it is not a revolution when NATO is in charge of the political process as it is, an economic process as it is in Libya. So something else is going on. So it's fair to say there is a revolutionary tide sweeping the Arab world, has been sweeping it since last year. Now, I would be unfair to the United States to suggest the United States is not involved. In fact, Obama and Hillary all the time keep referring and keep praising themselves and their administration and say that they are on the side of the Arab people. And they always pat themselves on the back. And I think in that regard, they are right. They are involved. But they are on the side of the counter-revolution. They are on the side of the counter-revolution. So there is a dialectic going on in the Middle East, a revolutionary tide, and there is a counter-revolutionary tide. I think the fact that there was such a sweeping fervor in Egypt, and the symbol of the aspirations of the people of the region is summarized by a simple but very ambitious slogan that has been chanted from Morocco all the way to Bahrain. And it says, الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. People want the downfall of the regime. It is a very categorical statement. In Arabic it is. I think in English it should be too. And by that they mean they don't want half measures. And I think if you look at what has transpired in Egypt and what has transpired in Libya and what transpired in Bahrain, certainly it is even less than half measures have prevailed. And this is part of the doing or the undoing of the United States government. Let's take it first in general. I think what is very clear is that there is a tyrannical order in the Arab world. And the tyrannical order is not due, as much as classical Orientalists would like us to believe, to some cultural and religious factors that have prevented the Arabs from enjoying some of the freedoms that other people elsewhere have enjoyed. I think it's fair to say that, and of course I'm not a Democrat, I don't call for democracy, and I don't think that free election is the answer. I don't even think free election is possible in the Arab world for sure, because we have American money and Saudi money that would cancel any free election anywhere in the region. What happened, this is the coalition that has been in charge of the tyrannical order of the region for a long time. Let me say the following. It's fair to say there is a tyrannical order, in the Arab world. The tyrannical order has been in place for a very long time. It's fair to say it has been consolidated in 1979. 1979 is the year when Egypt was forced by the United States to sign a peace treaty with Israel. A dictator, Anwar Sadat, was conveniently found. He was propped up, armed and funded. And this dictator, an unrepentant anti-Semite and a Nazi, that's Anwar Sadat. I know it hurts the feeling of many Americans because they have been grown to love him, admiring him, and say good things about him. In fact, Jimmy Carter, who refers to himself as a human rights president, has said that nobody has inspired him in the world more than Anwar Sadat. So please feel free to judge Jimmy Carter, somebody who is most inspired by an unrepentant anti-Semitic Nazi. So Anwar Sadat was the one chosen in order to consolidate a tyrannical order. But the Arab world, for much of the 1950s and 60s, has been a region that is torn asunder by rival camps. The United States consistently has been on the side of the reactionary forces, the conservative Islam, the Bin Ladenites, Muslims, the Bin Ladenite organization, Wahhabi Saudi Arabia, Gulf regimes, the most dictatorial, oppressive, strict government of the region. The United States was on that side. There was another side in the 1960s and 70s, enlightened Islam, progressive Islam, Arab nationalist secularism. Of course, the United States was against that tide and fought tooth and nail against it. So the United States was unable to construct a tyrannical order of its own choosing in the region. But it started with Anwar Sadat to build and develop a tyrannical order that would grow tremendously over the decades. Of course, it has to help it with that task Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf region that follow suit. And when the United States speak about lack of democracy in the Middle East, when it does, the few times it has, it only was referring to lack of democracy in governments that did not show subservient to U.S. foreign policy. So when the United States speak about lack of democracy, it only was spoken about Iran and about Syria. That's it, in the Middle East region. And this is why I think it's clearly understandable why whenever Jeffrey Feltman, the Assistant Secretary of State of the Near East, whose expertise in the Middle East is such that after 30 years of learning Arabic, he can only say hi and thank you, and perhaps, and I'm not exaggerating, and perhaps on occasion he may be able to order a falafel sandwich anywhere in the Arab world, but that's about it. That's the extent of his Arabic. Jeffrey Feltman, whenever he appears on Arabic channel, he's asked about all the countries of the Middle East. And whenever he's asked, he takes it back to Syria and to Iran. Because they cannot talk about the others. I mean, if he is going to be talking about Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya under Qaddafi, Egypt under Mubarak, Somal under the warlord, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Yemen, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq under occupation, all those countries are part of the American tyrannical order. So, of course, they are in no position to speak about democracy when they have been instrumental in arming and funding a monstrous tyrannical order in the Arab world itself. So, as it happened, the first country to be hit was Tunisia. Let us see how the United States dealt with Tunisia. I think it helps that Jeffrey Feltman, the guy in charge of the Middle East, used to be a diplomat in Tunisia a long time ago. So he poses as an expert on Tunisia. So he was asked once, what do you see about when it first happened in Tunisia? And hit Tunisia when? In December of last year. So they asked him, based on his assumed knowledge of the Arab world and Tunisia in particular, what kind of conclusions we can draw. And he famously, of course, said an answer that, at least for me and many others, has become a joke, which was, what happened in Tunisia is not to be influencing any other place. Egypt is not Tunisia, if you remember. Yeah, it proved to be, in fact, much bigger than Tunisia. So Jeffrey Feltman had to react to Tunisia. But Tunisia is a very interesting case, because Tunisia was a police state that was set up by Western government and the United States. It was cuddled. More than that, it was promoted as an exemplary model of repression to be emulated by Muslim governments in the region and beyond. That's how much they loved the Tunisian model. More than that, IMF and the World Bank consistently were referring to Tunisia as the economic recipe that all governments have to abide by. More than that, the liberal organization based in London, the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, those of you who study Africa know that the Mo Ibrahim Foundation is a foundation well funded in London, and it basically rates and evaluates the political economies of all African countries. And it has put Tunisia in its top 5 ranked countries of the entire continent. So it hit Tunisia when the United States was not expecting it. The United States now takes credit because they have called for the Tunisian dictator to leave the country. And in fairness, since I, like many others, have been following what was happening in Tunisia, I would agree with that. Obama did call on the Tunisian dictator to leave Tunisia as soon as he fled the country. This is literally true. When the United States was certain that this guy is not going to fight a battle that they want him to fight, they want him to kill more. I mean, you know that the number of people who have been killed by the Tunisian dictatorship without any protest by the United States government exceeds 600 in Tunisia alone, by the way. The number is not official. We don't know the exact figure because it's too embarrassing to release given America's close relationship with the Tunisian dictatorship. So the Obama administration did not give up on that government. More than that, the chief of staff of the Tunisian army admitted to Egyptian newspaper, Al-Masri al-Yawm, that he was contacted by elements in the U.S. government so that he would engineer a coup d'etat in order to preserve the tyrannical order of Ben Ali. So this is the situation that happened. I have to say that it wasn't with Tunisia, but it certainly was with Egypt and Bahrain, that America's client tyrannical order, which has become quite powerful, because the United States was able to eliminate irritant governments in the region over the years. Of course, all of them were tyrannical governments. Those on the side of the United States and the few who were not on the side of the United States. Saddam is a tyrannical order, whether he was pro-American, and he was for a while, had a strong alliance with the United States for much of the 1980s, and he was a tyrant even after that. The United States wanted to eliminate the irritant government, the ones who did not enjoy consistent subservient to the United States government economically and politically all these years. So the Saudi order was growing in size in the region, and governments were hammered to join in. So the true Bush doctrine that was highly touted was not to pressure governments to engage in democracy. I mean, how can you square any rhetoric by the U.S. government on democracy with its strong alliance with Saudi Arabia, the most oppressive government on the face of the earth, especially if you do care about women's rights, and of course the U.S. government does not, and especially if you take into consideration America's strong alliance with the regime of war crimes. And I'm talking about the Israeli usurping entity, which is set up and institutionalized throughout the decades on basically through war crimes. So the United States was incapable, I mean fundamentally, genetically incapable of promising democracy when its regional order was based on this kind of system. Now, with the case of Tunisia, the United States was very afraid of being taken aback one more time, although it was. Because, I mean, what can you do? Its chief Middle East expert, Jeffrey Feltman, reassured them that Egypt is not Tunisia, and of course it hit Egypt big time. Egypt was not an easy matter. This was when the counter-revolution began. This is when it grew. And for the first time, we have a counter-revolution that is American on the one hand, and it has elements that are regional, Saudi and Israeli and Qatari on the other hand. But for the first time, we see that the Saudi and the Qatari-Israeli alliance was going beyond the orders of the United States. There were some mild disagreements, although they were part of the same umbrella of the counter-revolution. Egypt was not an easy matter, not for the size of the population, not for the poverty. I mean, if anything, the United States is complicit in the poverty of Egypt. It is the one which reversed the economy of development that was started by the Nasser regime of the 1960s. The United States ended the kind of economy that was built on heavy industrialization. I mean, I used to go as a child to Egypt. I rode in cars made in Egypt. Any of you have been in cars made in Egypt called Nasser cars? This is the kind of economy that Nasser built in Egypt. The United States reversed all that because it wanted to push for the kind of the privatization economic model that ruined Egypt, ruined Tunisia, and has been ruining much of developing countries. So the United States' care about Egypt was not only about pushing an economic model on the Egyptian population, but it was also about this precious relationship for Israel. The United States' policies are clear. It wants any Arab government that is willing to sign a peace treaty with Israel and to preserve it, and for that, it will be supported no matter how many Arabs it kills. I mean, of course, the United States was enthusiastic about the massacres perpetrated by King Hussein of Jordan in 1970 and 1971 because he had a secret relationship with Israel that it would not come out in public until 1993. So Egypt, there was a peace treaty with Israel. So the Hosni Mubarak regime was doing a lot for the United States. He was the regional enforcer. Within the Arab League, he was America's eyes and ears. In 1990, when the United States wanted to invade Iraq, he was the man to go to. He assembled the Arab League in a most arbitrary, undemocratic fashion, just like the meeting today that was presided over by the Qatari Prime Minister. And he was the one who basically decided that the Arab League is going to invite the United States to invade a fellow Arab country. I mean, try to reconcile that with an Arab League whose defense charter indicates any attack on one Arab country is an attack on another. But be that as it may, that is how precious Hosni Mubarak was for the American. Hosni Mubarak wanted to kill as many people to stay in power. He killed 100, by the way. We don't mention that anymore. And human rights organizations in the West do not make a big deal out of that. Because notice, human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International are not innocent organizations by any means. I can say that perhaps because there are staffers in Human Rights Watch who have been supplying me, to my great pleasure, of secret internal memos and documents from that organization, which tells me, it's getting very stuffy in this room, by the way, and I hate being warm.
Could someone see if they can prop the door there?
Anyway, so, yeah, we can open the door, that'd be great.
And maybe if everybody could sort of move their seats a little bit over to the side,
No, the thing is, like,
so that the people that are behind the door. I knew this room was too small.
Samir Talfan? No? So, I mean, I have to say, like, when I talk about these issues, I get in a really bad mood. And if I get really warm, I'll be like in a doubly bad mood. So then I'll start taking out on you and lashing out. I don't want to do that. And start throwing sharp metal objects in your direction. So, it is, yeah. So, here was Hosni Mubarak, and here was the United States facing dilemma. So he was allowed by the United States and by its regional client to kill as many people as he can to stay in power. It is not mentioned he flew fighter jets. I mean, he ordered fighter jets to be flown over the protesters in Tahrir Square in Cairo. There was not even a sign of protest by the United States government. No, in fairness. The State Department official spokesperson, I have to be fair to the Obama administration, as much as I can. The official spokesperson, and you can go to January and February to see that, the United States government officially condemned the protesters in Cairo for the resort to violence, I guess because they allowed the bullets to come and kill them. So I guess when protesters receive bullets from a friendly government with the United States, that is considered a call to violence by the United States. So the Obama administration did condemn the protesters, by the way. So the United States wanted him to do as much as he can, to kill as many as he can to stay in power. He tried, he did, but he could not stay in power. The revolutionary tide kept going. And of course, as we now know from the New York Times, there were two friendly clients of the United States who were putting pressure on the Obama administration to allow Mubarak to kill more people to stay in power. Netanyahu and the King of Saudi Arabia were the two lobbyists for Mubarak with the U.S. government, and they tried their best on daily phone calls to basically give him as much leeway. What was the United States' position was? It was very clear. They want Mubarak to stay in power, but they wanted him to engage in reform. They believe the dictator who's been in power since 1981 to be the one who engineered reforms. And then when the Egyptian people made it very clear that they will not stand with that guy in power, the United States very grudgingly and reluctantly came up with a compromise solution.
That was 20 minutes.
Oh, really? Okay, I haven't started.
That's why I'm here.
The United States then came up with a compromise solution. They said the best hope for reform in Egypt would be for the head of the secret police of Mubarak to take over as successor. That's a true story, by the way. Omar Suleiman was chosen by the United States to be the successor to Mubarak to engineer reform. This is very much akin to somebody looking at the Nazi government and saying, we cannot handle Hitler anymore, let's bring Himmler in. Himmler is our only hope for reform in Germany. I mean, this is the Obama administration official position. And as you know, the story went, it was untenable for either of them A military power behind the scene is running the show. They're running it on behalf of the United States and on behalf of the Gulf money that is funding them openly. I mean, every few weeks we hear about $1 billion coming to the coffers of the military dictatorship of Egypt, and nothing is mentioned about how it's spent. There is a puppet civilian government that's put up by the military government, but they are running the show. I have much hope that with the Egyptian protesters, they're going to keep the tide. So the United States realized at this point that things are becoming very much dangerous, especially when Israel has been weeping, it hasn't stopped, over the fall of Mubarak. That is when the blueprint of the counter-revolution has been set up by the United States, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and Qatar. What are the features of the counter-revolution? Basically, they are, one, to basically preserve all the client regimes of the United States. So the United States is now doing everything it can to keep Morocco, Algeria, Jordan, all Gulf regimes, the Iraqi puppet government. And as you know, the Iraqi puppet government did face its own uprising, but it was put down by force without any whimper by the U.S. government or any commentary or reactions in the U.S. press. So all these governments want to be preserved. Second, the United States want to exploit revolutionary context to steer it in a different direction. And that's what they did in Libya. In Libya, as you know, since 2000, Gaddafi has been a client of the United States and of Western government. The United States, however, within few months of the uprising, decided that since this guy has been loyal all along, he could be expendable, and we can take advantage of the situation to bring a regime of our own choosing inside Libya itself. And that's what happened. Of course, I do not want people to despair, to think the United States is running the entire show. There are some leftists and some Arab nationalists now who are so despondent they think the United States is running the entire show. I say, think again. I mean, the gas pipeline to Israel has been bombed for the 7th time yesterday, and you think the United States is controlling the show? They want us to believe that. The United States want to take out agency from the Arab people. They want to convince us, as Israel has tried to do all these decades, that we are incapable of changing the situations. We cannot bring about change, that the enemy is too strong, too invincible. There's nothing we can do. Of course, what has happened in Egypt and elsewhere is proving otherwise. In Libya, however, there are things that have been happening that will go against the United States' wishes. It's very likely that the movie I'm watching in Libya, I have seen before in Afghanistan, not enjoying again. Without exaggeration, it's fair to say, the NATO has been arming and funding and bringing into power Bin Ladenite organization in the country. And as you know, the place is far from a democracy. Having said that, oil production is beyond expectation, and they are going to do away with the previous subsidies of the state socialist system that was put in place. Gaddafi was a tyrant, but there were social programs that are now going to disappear. This is not a chant for the preservation of Gaddafi. Let me make it very clear. I am against every single Arab regime, but I do not believe that Qatar or Saudi Arabia or NATO are countries that have credibility to bring about democracy or desirable change in any of the Arab countries. So I should now be... how much time do I have now?
You have 5 to 6 minutes.
5 to 6 minutes. Let me conclude by making observation about what the United States is up to now. I think there is a very sinister, nefarious alliance that are now being set up. This is part of the counter-revolution. So the counter-revolution has several features. In addition to preserving the regime that have been loyal to the United States for all these decades, the United States is also trying to basically exploit the revolutionary situation to bring about desired change, like in Libya and in Syria. The third element of the counter-revolution is an alliance, believe it or not, with Islamist forces. The conservative reactionary Muslim Brotherhood is now clearly making friendship with the United States and making soft noises even to Israel that they are not going to cancel Camp David in Egypt, that they are not going to cause war in the Golan Heights. They are making these noises because they are not new in the business of serving the United States. Remember, when Nasser kicked them out of Egypt, deservedly in my opinion, in the 1950s and 60s, these were the enemies of the Egyptian revolution. They were, back then there was a Cold War. They were on the right-wing side. They were on the side of the United States, of Saudi Arabia, and of Israel. And it is for this reason that Nasser did not want them to work and operate in Egypt. The ones who unleashed them in Egypt, and the one who produced the Islamist forces, of course, is the unrepentant anti-Semitic Nazi Anwar Sadat, the client of the United States in Egypt. So I think that what's happening today should not lead one to despair. The United States or the counter-revolution is far from winning. The revolution has not won in any place. There is not a single place where I can see there's a revolution. Karl Marx wrote somewhere, and I have been rereading him for that reason, that there is a revolution when the political power and the social economic power of the past regime are demolished. None of that has happened. Neither in Tunisia, An-Nahda, the new victorious party funded by Qatar, I should mention, in Tunisia, have promised to maintain the governor of the central bank and the minister of finance in Tunisia, who are left over from the Ben Ali dictatorship. Why? Because they were trained at the World Bank. And in Egypt, suddenly the Muslim Brotherhood is not making any noises about the peace treaty with Israel. So something is being set up. Having said that, I think something is very important happened. The very ironclad hold by the Secret Service in Egypt and Tunisia and elsewhere has been broken forever. And even in Syria, people are no more afraid. That's why they keep on turning into the street. And that means conspiracies of the United States and the counter-revolution will continue. And they will increase apace. But there is also another counter-revolution that will also be happening in order to undermine the counter-revolution. So it is a dialectic of revolution that is taking place. It is a changing picture altogether. It is not clear. And I think, remember, when you look at the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, that it took years for the revolution to set in. So I think it's far from over. I think that Tantawi and his comrades are not going to be ruling Egypt for a very long time. And I think the notion that the United States is going to succeed in stealing yet again the destiny of the Arabs from them is, I think, too naive a view. I think what has been broken is too important. Sacrifices have been too immense for the Arabs to allow that to happen again. So with all that, despite all the negatives, I am excited and thrilled. I think more action is to come. Thank you.
I will be taking a stack of names. If I know your name, I will call on you by it. If I don't, I will call on you by an article of your clothing. Okay, hang on a second. I'm going to call on the first person first. Everybody else, keep your name, keep your hands up. The gentleman in the black vest.
The statement you made that the Muslim Brotherhood would be somehow cooperating with American interests is unimaginable to me, but explain that, especially in light of the fact that your last statement that we should not put aside or start being disappointed in the fact that it's going to be the whole revolution or counter-revolution has fallen, that in fact the Arab countries will rise up and in fact take over and democracy will take place. If that's possible...
I didn't say democracy. That's the last of my concern, but go ahead.
True, but in the sense of controlling their destiny.
Right.
If, in fact, the Muslim Brotherhood could be taken over, how is that possible with the average Arab?
Well, you see, people in this room may not know this. The United States government has been in alliance with the Muslim Brotherhood and the various Islamist organizations for decades. Throughout the Cold War, there were many speakers from Islamist organizations, fanatical people by my secular standards, who were brought into the United States. Many of the types that you hear about, these Muslim radicals, like Omar Abdul Rahman, they were allowed visas into the United States. I know people who are who were communists for 2 years in the Arab world, who have never been allowed into the United States. And yet, these Islamist types, bin Ladenite types, have visited the United States so many times over the years. There has been a very close relationship for much of the Cold War. That changed only in the 1990s with the rise of Hamas and its attacks inside Israel. It was only then, even Hamas had contacts with the United States government, as some of you know. And then the Israeli lobby in Washington dictated that there should, the old formula about Fatah organization, that there cannot be any contact with Hamas or with any of the Muslim Brotherhood organization in the Arab world, because they have to condemn, they have to do what they're told, like Fatah organization did in the case of the Palestinians. And only then the suspension of talks occurred. That suspension of talks did not cover intelligence contacts between U.S. officials, CIA types and Hamas types and Muslim Brotherhood types. As you know, as soon as, I don't like the term the Arab Spring, and I wish it's not used in the flyer, I think it's an offense to the Arab people. These are words and labels that are produced in some offices in Washington, D.C., and there's a reason why they produced it. I don't want to go at length about that because I can say a lot about it. I was thinking about it this morning, and I wrote about it in my blog because I was very upset about these terms. And here I am, I'm speaking at one of them, under the umbrella of one of them. You see, when it first started, the United States wanted its own clients. They wanted the revolutionary tide to be nonviolent. And they started the myth, promoted in the New York Times, that this is a nonviolent struggle. It's not. And please, I'm not making any apologies. It's a violent struggle by the Arabs. And I think justifiable. They have lived under violent regimes for all these decades, and they have decided at all costs to bring down those regimes in any way possible. If you look at what happened in Egypt, in the Suez area, it was a violent revolt. What's happening in Syria today, part of it is supplied and supported by the United States and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, of course. And the United States' position is very hypocritical. The United States set up militia in our region. They set up militias in Libya. They set up militias in Iraq, some of the most brutal. They set up militias in Somalia. But yet, whenever there are armed groups that want to fight Israel, they say, no, you cannot have armed groups because they suddenly get Weberian. They say the state should have monopoly over the use of force. And yet, so in the case of Hezbollah in Lebanon, because they fight Israel, they are not supposed to have arms. But the State Department made it very clear the other day. They said people who are raising arms against the Syrian government should not put down their arms. So if they are using violent techniques against client governments in Iran or Syria, the United States bless their efforts. But if they are using violence against their own clients, of course that would require the meeting of the Security Council of the United Nations. So the Muslim Brotherhood has now resumed contact with the United States. It's now open. In the case of Tunisia, in the case of Egypt, I am not sure of the case of Hamas, but would not be surprised. So this is not new. It's historical.
Okay. I have the gentleman with the shirt, and then we'll stay right next to me.
Yeah, I do agree with the premise of the first question. I have a different one. My question about your comment about the staying power of the Assad regime.
Yeah.
And also the Williams proposal to sort them out when that regime is elected.
You see, my position on Syria is not to the liking of many of people I know who support the Syrian revolt or opposition. In the case of Syria, I am against the regime, but I'm against the opposition, the main opposition group called Syrian National Council, which is dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood, and it's no secret. They pick up civilian types with suit and ties, and they say, we want a civilian government, and that's our evidence, because they bring a Syrian professor from the Sorbonne with a suit and tie, and who's a secular guy, and I like him very much. And that is in order to disguise the control by the Muslim Brotherhood. But even that guy is now complaining about the behind-the-scene manipulation by the Muslim Brotherhood. And I think that for those of you who are, I know many of you are activist types, I don't think you should shy away from criticizing opposition groups in the Arab world. I mean, when we are opposed to regimes, it does not mean we should support anybody who's against that regime. In the case of Syria, I'm very clear and categorical. I oppose the Syrian regime. I want it overthrown. But I am categorically against the Syrian National Council of the Muslim Brotherhood because I think they are not going to deliver salvation to the Syrian people. I mean, the reason, maybe because I'm 51 years old, I have seen opposition groups become tyrannical government. The Ba'ath Party, my friends, the Ba'ath and enemies, if there are enemies of mine here, the Ba'ath Party used to be an opposition group. And it also promised freedom to the people. So I say, I'm not going to wait for the... I mean, look at the Khomeini revolution, the Khomeini theft of the revolution in Iran. I mean, I was very young at the time, but I was opposed to any alliance between communist and secular and the Khomeinis, and look what he did later. So I'm not going to wait for the Muslim Brotherhood to get into power and start slaughtering secular and leftists so that then I will condemn them. I think we should do it now. And we should call for a third alternative, neither this or that. The Arab people, the Syrian people deserve much better, especially when the other side has become an unabashed tool of Saudi Arabia and of Qatar and the United States. Just this morning, I was watching Al Jazeera, which has become, as you know, horrible voice of the Arab counter-revolution. And on Al Jazeera, I saw a representative of the Syrian National Council. He began his remarks, instead of like saying the religious language and jargon, he thanked Qatar, and he thanked Saudi Arabia, and he added the other Gulf countries. I mean, somebody who is indebted to these types of government is going in any way credibly to concretely establish democracy in Syria. I mean, far from it. And I think we also should problematize the promise of democracy. I don't think, we should interrogate that. I don't think it's democracy we should be after. You should read the press conference by the new Libyan finance minister, Ali Tarhouni, who used to be a professor at Washington State University. This guy made it very clear. He said when he came to power in Libya, I was astonished, he said, at the extent to which people receive subsidies from the government in Libya. Yeah, I'm sure that was to the chagrin of Western government, IMF, and the World Bank. So now they're going to reverse all that. These were tyrannical government. But in the 1970s, these republics in Egypt, in Syria, and in Iraq, they brought about development for the countryside, subsidies, programs for the poor. In Iraq, they eradicated illiteracy, for example. So what we are seeing now, reversal of the social economic policies, some of which were bad, some of which were good, some of which were good but badly implemented. And they're going to replace that with another tyrannical regime with bad economic policies. So it seems to me, what is democracy? And why should we insist on it? Especially when the United States, look at Egypt. As soon as Mubarak fell, the administration asked Congress for $50 million in order to support pro-democracy groups in Egypt. The United States is blatantly interfering in Egyptian elections. And when the Egyptian Military Council said, we don't want the United States to fund groups, the United States protested. They threatened to cut off all aid to Egypt. How dare you not allow us to interfere in your elections? This is the reality of it. For this reason, until further notice, democracy and free election is on the last of my agendas.
Okay.
The staying power of the Syrian regime, that is my question.
What's that?
Can you comment
Oh, the staying power.
It's gonna stay.
You see, the BBC correspondent who is now covering Syria emailed me yesterday that according to the British military attaché, he said that the Assad regime has 2 or 3 months. I think this is highly optimistic on the part of Western government. I think the staying power of the regime is much stronger. I know from Twitter and Facebook, from people I know, who I communicate with in Syria, that there is, whether you like it or not, basis of support for the regime in Syria. The Kurds have been very quiet in Syria. If I want to speak in sectarian terms, the Kurdish areas have been rather quiet. And there is no indication that the Syrian National Council is able to appeal to all Syrian society. Perhaps because the leading organization is a sectarian organization beholden to the government of Saudi Arabia. There's no secret about that. And because they have also engaged in sectarian killing in the area of Homs and elsewhere. So for this reason, I think the staying power of the regime of Syria is going to prove longer than its enemies assume. And I think also because there are certain elements in Syria and outside who want to fight because they feel this is a decisive battle. Plus, I want to add this. I am still not sure that Israel wants to see the Syrian regime down, because I believe chaos in Egypt, and I am in favor of chaos. And because I'm really enjoying what's happening in Egypt and so on, especially what happened against Israel and its embassies. I've played these scenes on YouTube more times than I've played songs on YouTube. I think that the American and the Israeli governments want the regime weakened, but not necessarily overthrown.
Okay. I have the gentleman right next to me, and then
Hi, Asad.
Hi.
Years ago, I told you that I disagreed with the term the Arab street.
Yeah.
And you can elaborate on that if you want to.
I have done a lot. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. But Westerners, especially Americans, like catchy parallels, and I think that the reason, my perception, not denying anything you said, my perception about the Arab Spring is it's a catchy parallel to the Czech Autumn. So I see a more innocuous, appellation.
That's the last thing we want to emulate, I hope. Yeah.
Be that as it may. I agree with you. I've always been dismayed that the left, which supported the armed struggle of the Vietnamese liberation movement and supported the armed struggle of the Sandinistas, and certainly entitled Castro and the Cubans to resist the U.S. through armed resistance if necessary, and supported the armed struggle of the black South Africans during apartheid. All of a sudden, when it comes to the Palestinians, say that only nonviolent resistance is legitimate, and that the Palestinians don't have a likewise moral right to engage in armed struggle. My question, though, is, as I mentioned in the previous session, but I'd like your opinion too, certain but not all African-American, so-called Afrocentrists, as they identify themselves, have sort of painted Gaddafi as like the Castro of Libya and the Castro of Africa, only with hundreds of billions of dollars more than Castro has, and painted Libya as really kind of the Sweden of Africa. So if you can keep track of all those different jumps, I'm wondering what you have to say about that.
Oh, no. I mean, I'm very aware that there have been people who have tried to create a revolutionary leftist appeal or aura for the Libyan dictator. I think, even though I think it's overly done, and anytime there is a leader in the Middle East who disagrees with the United States, he is immediately dismissed as a nutcase by the United States. I mean, Khomeini has been called crazy, Saddam crazy, everybody who speaks. And I think it's true. I mean, you have to be crazy, according to the United States, to disagree with the United States. I mean, the United States want total obedience, and only crazy people, by their definition, would disagree with them. But I think in the case of Libyan dictator, I think he has proven over and over that he really may be a nutcase. And I mean, I think that he has never, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, Castro has charm. I mean, I think there are certain achievements of the Cuban Revolution. I mean, Cuba has sent medical advisors and fighters all around Africa. And I think in the case of, so there are things to be said about Libya, about Castro, but in the case of Libya, I mean, this guy has squandered billion on building monuments for himself, making conferences all the time about his so-called Third Universal Theory, which read nonsensical. He's also harmed the Palestinian revolutions in many ways that you would think. He has given money at some points, but he's tried to manipulate them in many ways. He made some of them mercenaries for his own agendas that have nothing to do with Palestine. I mean, I am too intimately aware of his role within the Palestinian revolution from early on to be totally cynical about this guy. And the way he has been so enamored with himself. And I also must add, on the literary front, I unfortunately read the novel he wrote, and it's so bad. I mean, no, aside from the Green Book, he wrote a novel. He wrote an actual novel, and it was made into a big festival play and turned into a movie and stuff. So, I mean, there's nothing to be said about this guy. Having said that, I mean, with the billions of dollars he has engineered social programs, and I certainly believe that Libya under the previous regime was a colony, and there was a military base for the United States and for Britain, and he ended that. But I think the early promise, you see, early on there was a collective leadership, and there were free officers of Libya who wanted to turn Libya into a socialist experiment. But within a few years, he took it over and he turned it into a very stifling, unimagined place. I mean, I have a friend of mine who worked for the United Nations. I went to school with her in Washington, D.C. She goes there for doing a study of the Libyan economy in the 1990s. And she tells me she enters her room in the hotel, and she checks in. She wants to take a shower, discovered to her horror that the rooms have no locks. So she thought there was a mistake in the room. She goes downstairs to the reception and says, I need a new room. There is no lock on my door. And they all laughed at her hysterically. They were like, you want lock in your room? How are we going to be able to open your doors anytime we want? If That's Libya of Gaddafi.
The Castro of Black Africa?
I'm sorry?
The Castro of Black Africa?
So I certainly disagree with that label. So.
Okay, I have this gentleman here, and then the guy in the Burberry scarf and white shirt.
Sure. I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about how you see things progressing in Palestine and how you look at,
Or regressing.
or either way you see them.
Yeah.
And what prospects you see.
Right. Well, I mean, strategically, I am always optimistic. I always have been optimistic. I always believe that Israel's demise is certain. I've always believed Israel's years are numbered. I believed that since I was in my teens, got active in Palestine question. I never thought that it is going to be within a span of my lifetime or a few years beyond. I am more optimistic than ever about that. I mean, if you followed closely, if you talked to people who were involved in the war in 2006 in Lebanon, I mean, this was amazing. Israel's wound will never be healed. I mean, people in South Lebanon, where I come from, told me that people who were on the scene fighting them, they could hear Israelis screaming when they were running away from Hezbollah fighters. I mean, I never lived to see a moment as glorious as it was. These were youngsters. Not the entire army of Hezbollah was deployed against Israelis. And they did such a job of humiliating Israel on the battlefield in a way that Israel has never experienced with all these Arab armies. It shows you. I mean, if Arabs are allowed freely to fight Israel, there's no miracle in this. This is the kind of outcome you will see. And this is why I'm optimistic about Egypt. I mean, on the question of Palestine, so there are like two trends. The trends that are repressive and the trends that are optimistic. On the other hand, look at Egypt. This place was a prison, not allowing any anti-Israeli activities to take place. Forget about the embassy. Are you aware that the Israeli government has deliberately, on purpose, and of course American media follow suit, clamped down on any coverage of the Eilat operation? Have you read about the Eilat operation, what a sophisticated attack on Israeli soldier it was? And notice how little in the press there was about it. And notice how little Israel talks about it. I mean, usually, if there is one of those firecrackers from Hamas that falls on a town in occupied Palestine, you will notice that they always bring up like, there were like 10 injured. And if you read the details, sometimes they would say they had like shocks. Israeli propaganda is so crude and so filled of lies that they actually, when they list the injured in a war with Arabs, they list like those who were feelings were hurt, those who were startled. These are part of the injured on the side of Israel. I mean, that's how desperate this war crime state is for victimhood reputation. But of course, it's so hard to sell now. So in the case of Egypt, I think things are going on. I mean, I'll say this to you. If Hezbollah had a secret network in Egypt when Mubarak was in charge, I mean, I would estimate Hezbollah has an army inside Egypt now. On the negative part, I think you have to remember that Israel has set up an occupation regime in Ramallah. I mean, I regard Salam Fayyad, Abu Mazen, and so on. These are like what we had in South Lebanon, Antoine Lahat, South Lebanon Army. That's the same version. And this is why, despite pleas for many friends of mine, people you like and admire, I mean, Norman Finkelstein and I had 2 weeks emails because he wants me to urge people on my blog so that they can support the move to lobby countries to vote for Palestine in Security Council. And I was like, I can't do that. I cannot support any effort spearheaded by Abu Mazen and these types. Nothing good can come out of these. And notice how they allowed the United States to lobby the Security Council, just as the United States lobbied the Security Council in November 1947 to produce the unjust partition plan of Palestine then. They have lobbied now so that they do not have the 9 votes which they used to have. And what is the Palestinian side saying about that? Not a word. Because they have a secret arrangement. What they need more than anything else is the supply of the money from the Gulf and the taxpayers' money that Israel steals on its behalf from the Palestinians, and they want that supply, to be returned. So I think this notion of, having Palestine a member of UNESCO and all that stuff. I mean, I don't get excited about these things. I mean, it seems to me, especially because the leadership is running it, it's a diversionary tactic to lose sight of the other things that we need to focus on, which is BDS and armed struggle against the state of Israel. Together, not one as a substitute of the other. I mean, the Ramallah group is so suspect, in my opinion, that notice now when they speak about boycott, they don't mean boycott of Israel anymore. they mean we should only boycott products that are produced on the Israeli settlement in the West Bank. Like, other than that, please enjoy them.
That's Chomsky's position too.
Well, I mean, who said I agree with that?
Okay, I'll put you back on the list because there's a couple of, we're now, I was going to say we have a little time left, but now we don't anymore. So I have this gentleman here and then the multicolored kafia.
We can talk about these things because I'm on the plenary light. We're at 3:15. We have.
I asked this a little trepidation in the room. Seems to be both people that follow you as well. But, I'm going to go ahead and assume that you're anti-U.S. intervention in the Middle East.
Really?
No.
Well, that's a presumption. Yes. Me of all people? No way.
I would like to ask you, what do you feel is the role of somebody that's a supporter when you believe in that regard? What's the role of the American citizen in perhaps seeing furthering that? And also, that democracy is not really something that we should be focused on in the Middle East as a necessary end.
Right.
Over reaching with alternatives.
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, the first front, I mean, I'm always reluctant to give people advice because, I used to be a Marxist-Leninist and then I discovered anarchism. So the notion that the elite, the vanguard can give counsel or commands to the audiences and to the masses is something that I'm always wary of, especially in the United States, in a country where I am very hopeless about change within. I mean, I believe that whatever space we have on the side of the left is part of what Herbert Marcuse called repressive tolerance, and as a result, it is used within the system for its own benefit. I'm very pessimistic on that front. I think people do great work, but I am not an expert on that, and I have always believed on the issues that matter, change will come over there, wherever there is, Vietnam, Middle East, Palestine, Latin America, and it will impose change on this country. Same thing with South Africa. Change happened in there. The Reagan administration was led kicking and screaming against its will because of the struggle of the people of South Africa. So in that regard, I'm not optimistic about change within America, as much as I respect the struggle of some people who do that. And also there are certain things that are so obnoxious that happen that leave you dumbfounded even about people on the left. And when you read about, what's that group, the Wall Street, Occupy Wall Street? I mean, when you read that they were afraid to leave a statement on Twitter in support of Palestine, and then they took it. I'm sorry, which one? Of the flotillas, right? Even about the flotillas, a peaceful act. I mean, they had to retract it. I mean, it gives me a sense of cynicism about sectors, not all, of the side of the left in America about change. And I'm also very unhappy about the extent to which there has been silence. I mean, the anti-war movement has been dead, and there are. You know how many American wars are going on now? Somalia in secret, North Africa, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Lebanon. The United States is involved in all of those wars, without a doubt. On the second question, I mean, what are the alternatives for democracy and so on? Chaos. I believe we have to bring down the regime, and we also have to fight against America's intervention in the region. So I am not one of those, I've never been a liberal. In my circles, we use the word liberal as an insult. I'm not a liberal to say that we want the United States to do good in the Middle East. No. I am one who believes the United States should butt out of the region completely, economically, militarily, and politically. And I believe that once that happens, maybe then I will start thinking about democracy. If we can change the banking laws so that we not allow Saudi and Qatari money to buy people and buy elections. And I also think that there's certain issue of economic injustices. Economic injustices are very primary. And I think this, what shall I call it? The cult of free elections is deliberately intended to engineer a regime with which the United States can do business, and two, to preserve the status quo so that economic exploitation of the region can continue. And this is why I think we should problematize slogans of democracy and free elections. Economic injustices are issues that force people into the streets of the Middle East. And yes, Arabs do protest in the streets, just do other people. But for some reason, when American demonstrates, they take to the streets. When Arabs demonstrates, they take to the streets. But we don't say the American streets, as if Americans protest on the roofs, So
it's meant to convey the idea that Arabs live in the streets, Westerners live
Well,
in homes.
No, the intention, of course, you're right. The intention is that these are atavistic, barbarian savages who have no civilized conduct politically or socially.
And Occupy Oakland would support the flood. I'm just saying, Occupy Oakland would support the flotilla.
Right.
That's all I wanted to say. That's all I wanted.
You've been saying a lot.
No, I've just been interjecting.
Yeah, so I actually have to run. I'm a little bit uncomfortable speaking and running, but I'm going to do it anyways. So I was at the Occupy Cal demonstration on Wednesday, and I spoke about how I believe that stopping this government's attempt to advance the counter-revolution in the Arab world was a precondition of change in our own country. And there was actually, people cheered and applauded.
Good.
So what I wanted to ask a similar question, but I would phrase it differently. I apologize, I have to run.
Right.
But I don't want to ask you to comment on the specific role or what Americans should do.
Right.
And I understand the cynicism as well, but can you comment on the potential of the American people, not to change this country, but to stop what our government is doing over there? Or to
You
play a
see,
role in that?
I mean, look, I've been living in the United States since 1983. And in 1990, there was an anti-war movement that was starting to ferment and form after the preparation for the war in Iraq. And I spoke at many college campuses around the United States and Canada. And then nothing happened. There was no anti-war movement. And then there was this war, 2003, and the war in Afghanistan. 93% of Americans supported the war in Afghanistan. 93%. The war in Iraq in 1991, by February of that year, the United States dropped 80,000 rockets and bombs on Iraq. According to Navy figures, 70% of them missed their targets. 10% of smart bombs are dumb bombs. They miss their targets. And yet, look what's happening. And I see very little by the American public. I mean, look at the blatant racist discourse against Muslims. People in the Arab world often ask me, how can somebody like you who blog and speak against the United States government all the time and have that freedom? Does that say something positive about America? I tell them no. I have that margin because I happen to be a secular atheist. If I was a Muslim who go to mosque, I would have been shut down. If I had a Muslim, angry Muslim blog, I would have been shut down a long time ago. I have no doubt about that. So, I am aware of the parameters of debate of the United States. And I've seen many disappointments over the years. And I've seen the extent to which this country is becoming so blatantly racist. And most importantly, I still see public opinion surveys which indicate, at the best of days, Palestinians in the side of the Arab-Israeli question do not get more than 10% of American popular support. 64% of Americans are committed to Israeli war crimes. They never meet an Israeli war crime they do not bless. That's the United States that leaves many Arabs like me and others over there bitter.
Okay. I have 1.5 here, and then I'm okay. I guess I'll continue on this a little bit because I was the pleasure of I got involved being an activist and a socialist actually out of the anti-war movement and coming here to speak for many years.
1920s.
Yeah. Well, I wish I was then.
Yeah, I know.
There was more.
Exactly. There was more revolutionary promise back then. What year did Emma Goldman die? What year did Emma Goldman die? 40?
Right after.
Yeah, so we could have met her, 1920s.
But I guess for me, I'm a little bit more hopeful. On one side, I deeply acknowledge that racism in the United States just continues to fester, especially racism against Arabs and Islamophobia and stuff. And that's because the U.S. wants to, the mainstream media wants to change the narrative because everything about the Arab revolutions and the fact that they're continuing, the fact that people in the United States got to watch people in Egypt, via live television, have a revolution, that inspired the world, and it inspired movements throughout Europe, people in Greece, etc. It actually fed into workers in the United States in Wisconsin, fighting
Right.
against, war
Right.
and stuff like that, in which there was solidarity and
Right.
placards with Egyptians, and Egyptians said pizzas,
Right.
hot pizzas for people occupying the capital.
Right.
for reason, and
You see, your reading is accurate. The New York Times want us to believe that the white man inspired the Egyptian people, and there was some retired white professor in Boston, and he's the one who inspired all the Arabs. And nobody has heard of this guy. Yes.
I think that more and more changed quite a bit. And more than ever, we have the potential of building a movement for Arabs and Muslims, and they've shown actually in the spring of this year, the demonstrations I've been part of were never so multiracial. Mosques sent people out. I mean, I met Libyan activists, Syrian activists, Egyptian activists, many people I'd never seen at demonstrations before. And I think because there's a sense of hope and dignity, actually, that the revolutions have brought people in the United States and activists like myself who are anti-racist, trying to build this movement. But the problem has been the Democratic Party, which I think the Occupy movement is like, pushing back against this idea that these people in our government somehow rule us and are the ones that are going to point the way forward, because it was 2004 in the Democratic election and the idea that you had to get behind John Kerry and all that bullshit that totally collapsed the movement. And actually, I think part of organizations that supported the Democratic Party that constantly pushed Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims to the side and didn't want to talk about the question of Palestine that's happening there. So for me, I feel like I'm a bit more hopeful about the potential, and I've been participating in the Occupy movement, and I know there are layers and layers of people who actually want to build solidarity. And I participated in the court action last weekend that shut down the port, and the ILWU is at the forefront of shutting down the ports against, for the boycott of Israel. So I think for us, there's a lot of, I'll wrap up, I do think there's a lot of hope and potential, more so than I've seen in a long time. But I also don't want to, I also want to acknowledge the fact that I think Arabs and Muslims in this country continually face an immense amount of racism on a daily basis. And I salute you for having your blog and your analysis.
Thank you.
Look who gets to go on longer without interruption than others.
No, I mean,
I respect everything you said, but note the
I want to
difference.
say,
Who gets to go on without criticism? I'm one of two blacks in here. Look who gets to go on. I respect what you say, but I want to point out racism in this room. Look who gets to go on longer without interruption than certain other. I'm Native American too. Are you trying to one-up me? I'm Native American. I'm part black. I'm part Latino. Don't try to one-up me. I just want everyone to know why there's only two blacks in this room, because Ms. Ann here doesn't interrupt you, but accuses me of going on and on and on. Point, I hope, well taken.
I want to say that, I want to make it very clear that I'm very respectful of the efforts, and this is something I always carry when I speak to Arab audiences and on the media, of many Americans who are struggling for justice and who have shown more courage on Palestine and have done so consistently. I mean, my wife has been here from Lebanon for a year only, and she has already been to the Oakland protest and so on. So it has inspired many Arabs who live in this country. It has inspired Arabs who now know that not all Americans are alike. I remember in 2005, the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, once told me, he said, I used to have a closed-minded view of Americans, that they are all one line, that they're all warmongers. He told me after I saw the demonstrations before the war of 2003, I realized that I cannot create this image of Americans as one monolithic group, that there are many trends of the United States. So people over there are now very aware of that. So I'm respectful of these efforts, but I'm saying that there are certain realities that very much bothers me, especially on the question of Palestine. I mean, within Congress, look at the vote. Look at the vote of Congress. Immediately there is one or two dissenting members of Congress, member of the House, and one of the Senate, but he died, Robert Byrd, that was the only one. In the case of public opinion surveys, since 1970s, you ask Americans, between Arabs and between Israelis and Palestinians, which side do you support? From 1970s, same, 60 to 65 say I support the Israeli side, 10 to 14 say we support the Palestinians. Palestinians now are like 11. So, and yet I notice whenever Americans, I know from my classes, even without like propagandizing students, whenever they get to read the facts of the conflict, I notice there is an automatic conversion of students. So ignorance has been a great asset for the state of Israel, and that's why they get very nervous about any person going around the country who tried to basically produce the facts about Israeli war crimes.
Okay, I have this gentleman here, and then that one, and then
Again, he gets a second chance, huh?
okay, when he called out like you, I shut him.
No, he gets a second chance, huh?
Do you want to raise your hand?
He gets a second chance, huh? You know, there's a lot of subconscious racism among you white leftists, too. And you need to own up to it. No, I'm not going to be, no, I'm tired of being polite to you, white, racist, leftists. The only thing you understand is a black man shouting.
Stop calling everybody racist. We're all here to hear what
No, how many black people are here?
It doesn't
How many,
matter.
it doesn't matter? Or do you want this to look like 1953? You want this to look like Berkeley in the 50s?
You're making it look like
No.
Berkeley in the 50s.
No.
You should just let us.
No, I'm standing up for, and you know, if you can't stand up for yourself, sister, if you want to put up with that kind of implicit, unconscious double standard, you go ahead and do so. I'm tired of doing so. I'm going to make note of it.
I'm standing up because I have to go to the bathroom.
Hello. I was wondering if you could comment please on the new threats that Israel would bomb Iran, especially after the IAEA report, the new missile that they launched, 2 days ago last week, and also if you could comment on the opposition movement within Iran, Mousavi, the Greens. Are they merely a Western puppet? Are they merely liberal? What's going on?
Right. I mean, on the subject of the bombing of Iran and so on, the Christian Science Monitor, which I don't read regularly, but somebody sent me a link to an article. They have a chronology that since 1979, I don't know if anybody's seen that since 1979, Western governments in Israel have every few years made a claim that Iran is going to be having the bomb in a year or 6 months. Since 1979. I mean, they don't stop. And there's nobody in the American press who say that, which is more dangerous, potential Iranian nuclear weapons or actual weapons of WMDs in Israel itself. Actual weapons. And of course, they don't get any mention. And of course, there is such a climate in the Western media that Israel can audaciously lecture the world about the dangers of of nuclear weapons in Iran. Personally, I don't buy there's going to be a threat of war. I don't think there's going to be war. I think that even if Israel has wishes of war, and I don't think it does because it will know the consequence is going to be mighty, the United States is not going to allow Israel to do that. I mean, not out of peace intentions on the part of Obama, but he's running for re-election, and he worries about the consequences for the economy, the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, how that will affect shipping of oil to the world, and also about the potential of bombs on Israel from different directions. I don't think Israel has the military option. And the more they don't have it, the more they were saber rattling or making loud noises about the threats, because there is no actual military option. And suddenly the Israeli press is filled with articles. Somebody leaked a meeting in Israel about potential bombing by Israel to Iran. Since when the Israeli press, which is so submissive to the Israeli military censors, would leak anything that is not intentionally leaked by the Israeli government for propaganda purposes? So I'm very suspicious of all this noise that's being made. I think there is not going to be war, and I think Iran is going to produce that. But more importantly, nobody mentions the racist connotations of the discussion. I mean, Western media and Western countries want us to basically go along with the notion that nuclear weapons are dangerous in the hands of Muslims, but safe in the hands of Christians and Jews. I mean, if you think this is going to sell anywhere aside from the palaces of the polygamous princes and the kings of the Gulf, you're totally mistaken. You're totally mistaken. On the subject of Iran, my position on Iran is very much like Syria. And for that, I have been, upset many of comrades in Iran, outside of Iran. I've engaged in a bitter feud with a professor at Columbia, what's his name? Dabashi. I mean, I am in favor of the Iranian people overthrowing.
An angry Arab, an angry Negro.
I am in favor of overthrowing the Iranian government, but on Iran I say this. I believe the Iranian government, I mean, whether one likes it or not, and I don't like it, has more social basis of support than any Arab government. I think it's a fact. I mean, I think there are social segments in Iran that clearly support the regime. I don't believe that the liberal college campus liberals speak for all of Iran. They speak for a sector. I personally am in favor of the leftist activists in Iran who are against the Green Movement and against the regime. The Green Movement is led by a guy who wants to take us to the purity, these are his words, the purity of the Khomeini revolution. Well, personally, I don't like the purity of Ahmadinejad, nor the purity of Khomeini. I believe the Iranian people deserve neither. Right. Right. Closing remarks. I mean, I think we may address some of these things like in the plenary session, but I would say that I think it's very interesting that the United States is. I mean, the public is tuned in. I know from college campuses, people are tuned in to what's happening in the Arab world. I believe that Obama has not been a disappointment. I mean, I never had hope in him, so why would I be disappointed? I think Obama has been very consistent all along, and I think I feel bad for many of my friends, some not only liberals but leftists, how much hope they pinned on this guy. I know many leftist friends of mine who pushed me, Bassam among others, to vote for Obama and so on. And the thing is, there were never any signs. I mean, you know his controversial friend, Rashid Khalidi, who was made to be a big support. I mean, the friendship between the two was so controversial that he stopped talking to him and so on. And I spoke to Rashid, who was my teacher for many years back in Beirut, and he told me, I don't understand why the excitement about Obama. And that's his friend. He still likes him. He said, in all my private meetings with him, all these years in Chicago, long before he ran for president, he said he never ever uttered a word that could be considered damaging for his political ambition. He said he said he is a typical politician. He would never commit himself to any position that's damaging to his ambition. He said he would listen to views that were very pro-Palestinians in Chicago from Arabs. When he was sitting at fundraisers, he wanted their money. He listened, but he never spoke any words that would convince you otherwise, that he is just like, I mean, so for that reason, I think that I'm not expecting change to come here. I think there is hope from the boycott, Occupy movement around the country. The Oakland movement is more radical perhaps than the other ones. And I think there are things that are very inspiring. But I think what's happening in the Middle East is shaking the foundation of an imperialist order that has been put in place since the late 70s. And for that, many Arabs are excited. I am as nervous as we are about the damaging role of the United States in support with Israel and the Gulf government to abort a revolution in the making. Thank you for listening to me.